Welcome back to another episode of the Max Stern Podcast. Kyle Stitch here alongside James Finch. And today we are running down a couple recent happenings in the NHL, but mostly going to focus in on discussing the upcoming NHL draft, which will be held next week from when you're hearing this. We're recording this Wednesday evening, get our editing done, and then we'll get this out Friday the 19th. The draft will be taking place June 26th in Buffalo. We will be in attendance for round one and likely round two. If you're in the area, especially if you're do media or podcasting of your own and you're interested in connecting, let us know. Direct messages on X would be probably the best way to get a hold of us. Or I guess go to afpanalytics.com and send in a contact form with your email and everything, and we'll do our best to accommodate any requests that we do have. Appreciate you listening. Max Stern Podcast available on all major podcast platforms, including YouTube, where you can see our lovely faces as we talk to you. And our content, including contract projections, I already kind of referenced, afpanalytics.com. Base projections available for everyone. If you want a little bit more info or you want to generate our neat little graphics on your own, it's a small monthly subscription, $3 a month or 20% off, $28 for an entire year. I don't think you're going to find a better deal these days than that. So I hope it's worth it. We're going to continue to try to add things through the summer into next season, but we'll kind of see. We want it to be worth it for anyone. And I think with that, let's get into it. I guess we'll start. So we're going to start most recent and work our way kind of back for current events quickly. Again, we're recording this Wednesday evening, so some things could have happened between when we record this and when we get edit video up and everything and released on Friday. So most recent trade was Buffalo Sabres sending Michael Kesselring and the 27th overall pick in the 2026 NHL draft to the San Jose Sharks for the 20th pick in this draft. I think there are mixed reactions, so I think we'll start there, trying not to go too far into it. I don't know how far we can go, but let's start with I think the obvious, and then I'll let you kind of give your thoughts. I think the obvious winner is actually the player in this situation, because he goes to a fantastic situation, opportunity for him to get a true shot at playing time. Hopefully a healthy Michael Kesselring can really eat some minutes for the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah, so I mean, he's going somewhere where, like, even if they sign a guy and trade for a guy, he should have opportunity at top 4 minutes, which is ultimately what he didn't get with Buffalo, and that's what everyone thought Buffalo was kind of getting him for. They just didn't end up quite clicking when he was on the ice, and then just injuries made it real tough this year. I think I kind of agree. I don't mind it for either team. I think there might be some Buffalo fans that feel like we only moved up 7 spots, but in the first round, that's fairly significant to move up. It is in kind of the late first round there, so it's not the most flashy return by any means, but it's also a player who, again, was injured, ultimately took a bit of a step back from the prior year. So I don't mind that, especially if Buffalo's got kind of a list of guys and that kind of gets them into a next tier of prospects at that pick, or maybe it's just a slightly more valuable pick that they could flip in another trade. And then for San Jose, it's kind of the same as the player argument. They need defense and they need someone potentially capable of filling a bigger role. And I mean, they've got a very high pick in the draft. This was another pick later on to move back a little bit. Not a huge deal to get someone with the potential that Kesselring has. So I kind of like it all around. I don't dislike it for any team or player.
So Matthew Fairburn of The Athletic had posted that Buffalo valued the trade up as the equivalent of a mid second round pick, according to like their internal model. I don't know exactly where he got that info, but I'm sure his sourcing is spot on because he is always spot on when he has those type of reports and everything. So that's that's a pretty decent valuation when all said and done. I think there were some questions of, and I got a text from one of my friends, do would another pick have been a better, so just getting the second round pick or like a high third round or something, would have that been better than moving up the 7 spots? I personally pushed back and said I would rather have the quality over the quantity at this point for Buffalo, but I can understand the argument of having a second, considering I think they're missing both their second and third round picks this year. I can
Yeah.
understand the argument of wanting to fill that gap a little bit.
Yeah, I think second round was off to Winnipeg, third round to New York, Stanley Shen, and then Carrick.
Yeah,
Um,
that sounds about right.
to me, like it just goes back if they've got a list of players and maybe like this gets them into a higher tier of, um, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 players, whatever it may be, that they feel a little more comfortable with than at 27. Um, Not to mention, you could also look at it from a trade standpoint of it might be more valuable if they're looking to just flip assets to move up and get that 20 versus just do a straight trade for pick, I don't even know, 50. So I don't mind it. I'm gonna trust the team there and ultimately a analytics and scouting group that has hit on a decent amount of players lately.
Especially higher in the
Yeah.
draft in the first round. So, yeah.
Yep.
Next, I guess Toronto Maple Leafs had a couple interesting decisions as of late. They hired a head coach
Yeah.
and they made a very interesting trade. Let's start with quickly head coach, not going too far down that rabbit hole, but head coach, and then we'll get into their goalie and defenseman swap.
Jim Hiller.
Former LA Kings, what, year and a half on the job, year on the job?
Yeah, it so I saw a little bit some people kind of going back and forth on it, and it's I guess believed like he tends to value analytics numbers a little bit. So there's people looking at it from that side of it, or at least that fit within the organization. Maybe that's kind of a guy or a reason they identified him as one of their finalists. Um, Ultimately, I didn't really like how things went with the Kings. Um, there were some other intriguing names, some that initially were just off the board, and then the more you think about it, like that could be fun. Um, at the end of the day, I think I would have liked to have seen them go with someone a little new, a fresh face, but a lot of times teams don't do that. So I guess I'm not huge on the hiring, but I'm not completely against it. I It's enough of like a random, all right, maybe it'll work.
Interesting that he was an assistant coach with Toronto when they were one of the more high powered offensive teams in the NHL. But then, as you said, in Los Angeles, he was very much into a particular defensive shutdown structure that was probably hindering some of the talent that they could have had generating some offense. Scoring goals was an issue for LA. And I think you could make an argument roster maybe wasn't perfect, but I don't think that he did them any favors either with the way that he structured their play.
Yeah, I mean, that whole team across the board was kind of down offensively, and there are guys there who should be very close, if not point per game guys. So it might be a mixture of it a little bit, but Again, like maybe this works. We'll see. It's another try. Sometimes that's all a coach needs is kind of a new change of scenery, kind of.
And it's not like the results were bad in LA by any means. Like they were winning
No,
games and had good goal differentials and everything. So it's not like it's a completely like, are you kidding me? Kind of that was kind of how I felt with Seattle hiring Lambert the other year, where it's like he doesn't have a proven track record and not going to help bring what you want. I think Hillary, there's at least some positive arguments for. It'll be interesting, especially given Matthews, Nylander, McKenna likely being added to the fold, and Tavares all being definite offensive play drivers. We'll see if he lets them kind of run wild or structure them or kind of contain them in a structure.
yep. And so they've got their coach. They made probably one of the well, yeah, they made probably the biggest move at that point in the offseason, which was only a few days ago. Trade with the Flyers. They moved out Joseph Woll and Simon Benoit, a third pair defenseman. Brought in Samuel Ersson, Emile Andre, and just trying to remember off the top of my head,
Third
a
round pick.
2026 third round pick. Um, I'll say right away, I I don't love it for Toronto. Um, but I've also seen some reactions that are a little more strong than that as a negative for Toronto. And I think that might be, I don't know if unwarranted's the right word, but the way I kind of see this is, at least from Toronto's perspective, they, it seems, believe that they have an abundance of goalies in the organization. So Joseph Wall, Anthony Stolars, Dennis Hildeby,
Correct.
and I'm gonna completely butcher this name, but Aktiomov, Yamov, something.
I'm not even
I'm also
gonna.
not looking at the name, so like
Yeah.
that's just off pure.
That's why I'm not going to try because I don't have it in front of me, but
Yeah. So
very much anchoring the Toronto Marlies AHL Calder,
yes.
likely Calder Cup winning team.
Yep. And so Hildeby's looked good. I believe he would have to go through waivers this coming season. Um, so it starts to get a little log jammy with all four of them there. Wool has missed some time, and when he's healthy and playing consistently, he's looked good, but he's missed some time. To an extent, I understand saying, "All right, let's move one of Wool or Stolar's." Um, I would have thought they could do a little bit better as far as the return. Um, Ayrson has not been good the past couple of seasons. Like it's very much so gone downhill to the point of like past two seasons questionable having him play regular NHL game like consistently regular minutes. Um Emile Andre's kind of the interesting piece to me. Uh non NHL, decent profile, gets to the NHL, ultimately sort of stuck in third line minutes. At the same time, the results haven't been great. So I this is kind of a spot where I start to question like, okay, is there something else here with this player? Is it a player they think can fit into their team a little bit better, potentially provide a little more offense if given the opportunity? Maybe. Part of the other concern, and this will kind of wrap up my thoughts here because I don't really care about the third round pick. Andre is a small defenseman. Benoit is a big physical defenseman, and that has not gone unnoticed by a lot of fans, media, etc., because it seems like, especially defensively, the game or teams are trending towards having bigger defensemen.
It's kind of been pointed out in tandem with Hiller's hiring that Hiller has not seemingly liked to deploy smaller defensemen. Jordan Spence, Sean Dursey, in particular, Sean Walker was thrown out, but there's a little bit of you can talk yourself into why he wasn't playing as much, but kind of a couple guys that were have proven to be good analytically, not given the full on opportunity with in LA where Hiller was an assistant, then head coach, and then they make a move right before bringing him in to get smaller, get a puck moving defenseman. It could work out, but I think that kind of contrast to point out is very fair. And like the trade was already a little bit questionable decision making, and then you kind of compound that with the hire of head coach, and it's kind of like, do do we have a plan here? And I don't know if I see it yet.
Yeah, and speculation of is this just like the first domino falling and there's something else somewhat related to it? I don't know. Like all you could really say there is, are they freeing up cap space? But I don't. It feels a little premature to just say that's what they were doing here. Right? We'll have to see. Um, Ultimately, it might just be they felt they had too many goalies. Um, yeah, I don't love it for them, and I guess we haven't even really touched on the Flyers side of this, but they get a bigger physical defenseman third pair, and the key part of the trade is they now can run with Vladar and Woll as kind of a 1A, 1B, which significantly improves. Assuming Vladar can repeat what he did this last year and Woll can stay healthy, that's a very good tandem to have.
Yeah, yeah, much improved goaltending situation for Philadelphia because kind of tying things together here. We had talked about when we did our projections for Harrison in particular, like, is he even going to get qualified? And my pushback was, I don't know if the Flyers have any other option than to qualify him. That's how dire their kind of goalie situation was behind Vladar. Now that's not a question mark. Wool is definitely a good enough 1B, 1A type goalie because they don't necessarily, their pipeline is still kind of thin. But that's okay because now they have Wool is young enough and Vladar is also fairly young for a goalie, likely to get a long-term contract in the next 2 weeks, I guess we're at.
Yep.
That's all where all indications are. So they can at least feel a little bit better there. And I also, just as an observer, would feel a little bit better about their situation now.
Last current event happening trade. Ross Colton,
Yeah.
Colorado to Nashville. So Chris McFarland pretty much bringing a player with him to Nashville. Um, Colton's interesting, very good analytically. Kind of fell out of favor almost in Colorado. Um, I would look at it as so ultimately full deal. So Ross Colton to Nashville, um, as well as a for now at least depth goalie Isaac Posh. Um, then heading back to Colorado was another depth goalie Magnus Trona.
Corona. He
Corona.
likely is going to Sweden by all indications. So
Okay.
maybe that changes things a little bit. Went to Denver. So kind of going back home, if you will, where he went to college. So maybe he has an out that he could come back, but I think he had signed a
Okay.
contract to play in Sweden, so it might be people were talking about it being just a contract on the books number. You not being their national is kind of close to 50, so if they kept him on the books, could hinder a couple more moves between now and July 1st. And then there might be some rights that could be retained. I'm not 100% sure there, but
Okay.
definite depth goalie, but probably not someone that's necessarily going to be in the Avalanche organization.
Okay. And ultimately with him 2 third round picks, 2026, and then Colorado got back their 2027 third round pick. Um, my initial reaction was I love this for Nashville because they're not really giving up any premium assets. They're getting someone who should be a real good third line player, potentially capable of playing higher if that's how the roster shakes out. Um, Interesting that he can play center. He's kind of played center and wing, but you've got someone again analytically looks phenomenal. 1 year left and then UFA. But at this point in the off season, the best you can do is a couple thirds for that. Like this seems like the type of player that should be going for a more significant return. Um, what sort of popped in my head was Nick Waugh, which there's a little more term there, but he brought back a first. I don't know. It just if 2 thirds felt a little light, one of them likely being a late third, the Colorado one. Um, there was some speculation that because it's Colorado acquiring their own 2027 third, could there be an offer sheet? Um, sure, we can speculate that. They also freed 4 million with moving Colton, which is also probably one of the more significant aspects of this for them. But I don't know. I don't love it.
I mean, I guess pure value wise, I completely see where you're coming from. I think that Colorado basically, Colton was very clearly the odd man out. So every team calling them was going to be like, well, you're going to move him or you're going to have to do something with him anyways because he didn't really play in the playoffs. You need that cap space. So Nashville was the one to give a decent enough offer, I guess, to convince Colorado to just pull the trigger and free up some cap space now. Could have also been a situation where some teams were like, hey, we're interested, but we want to wait until, the draft or free agency to see if our other plans pan out. And Colorado could have been like, we need to make this move now because we have something else in the pipeline that we need to get done and we need that cap space. I don't know. It's definitely a little bit could be a little bit light, but it is also potentially just for a 1 year rental. Although if he plays decent, no extension, he probably can at least bring back 2 thirds at the trade deadline. So probably
Yeah.
money in, money out eventually for Nashville.
Last thing I'll say on this, just to wrap up the offer sheet thing. So them getting a third back and not having their own first would limit them to an offer sheet between 1,575,970 to 2,387,832. I don't know how many players you're really targeting in that range for an offer sheet and successfully getting them, unless it's someone who is like clearly should not be getting much more than a minimum and you're willing to pay that much. So I don't fully expect that to be an offer sheet type of move unless they somehow get their 2027 first back from Toronto. Then I'd start sounding the alarms a little bit.
That feels very unlikely.
Yes. Prospects.
Prospects.
All right, we did a little pre-recording exercise of trying to run through and make sure we don't completely butcher names.
We're still
Um,
gonna.
we for sure will, but we're doing our best. Um, so prospects from us has kind of been on and off in years. We've done it some years, haven't others. Mainly because contracts tend to be our main focus. Um, so what we tried to do as kind of an exercise for us, but I guess ultimately to discuss and put out there as some content. We gathered a general consensus ranking um, with a handful or two of different lists, and then we let the model run that you created. And so we've got an idea of where a player can land from consensus. We've got an idea of does the model like it from a statistical standpoint. And I guess yeah, from a statistical standpoint. Um, and we kind of came up with a combination of those two with the thought of if we were a team, we're likely using our scouting department and we're likely also using analytics and trying to combine the two and coming to a general ranking. So I think the idea for this discussion is while we have a general ranking here where we combine consensus with our analytical model, there's also trying to find like even with that combination, are there a few players here and there at different spots, first round, maybe early second, where we see value.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is where if we were sitting in a draft room, would we be like, hey, we need to have a little bit more of a conversation about this player. Scouts like him, but there's some concerning numbers. Do we understand why these numbers are the way they are? Is there a logical explanation? I mean, we're using just publicly available data from elite prospects, and that's all we're basically mostly what our models incorporating is just production and what's happening in the box score. A couple other things, height, weight, and kind of league and age as well, are all playing into those. But we know that we don't have everything. There are definitely factors that we're not able to capture. So there's it would be a conversation of, hey, the numbers aren't grading out real well. Is there a reason why? And you would hope that a scout who's banging the table for a player would be able to point to a reason why. And then it's up to kind of the decision is, does that make sense? Does that kind, especially like a stay-at-home type defenseman, they're not going to grade out super well in the analytic model based on production and everything. But a scout could be pounding the table because they have very good gap control, very good at denying zone entries, good at moving the puck up ice, but maybe not necessarily producing in the offensive zone. Those would all be logical reasons to say, okay, these two things differ, but we're okay with this. And the other thing I'll kind of note real quick, model is kind of still a work in progress. Did some tweaking already this year from last year. Might try and do a little bit more this year, but we'll see when we get things out. And just frankly, running out of time with enough projects on my plate already without trying to go absolutely insane. So
Yeah, I mean we're
we'll
down recording this to a week, and
exactly.
yeah, it's I wouldn't call it likely that there's another update, but
Po-
possibly.
yes. Yeah, I still also have to program our tax calculator for tax rates and everything for free agency. So, it's not like I don't have anything going on. So we'll see what happens here. But I think some of the tweaks that I did kind of make were positive. I like the output a little bit more, so I think maybe some things are on the right track, and now it's just applying it more broadly and kind of taking a similar approach. But again, we'll see where we are. There's a good chance that these are the final rankings. I don't know exactly. We'll put some article up, but I don't know exactly how we'll present everything ultimately this year. But I guess let's with that. I don't know if there's anything else like numbers, what we're accomplishing model wise that we need to hit on, or should we just talk about some players?
I think we just dive into the players. Drum roll for number one,
I'm
Gavin
terrible
McKenna.
at doing it. Yeah.
um, yeah, so I guess we have something interesting kind of right at the top of the draft. So, from a model standpoint, McKenna's number one. Stenberg, when we combine model and consensus, we would say he's number two, but from a model standpoint, he actually is number three. And there's names that would probably instantly jump into your mind of like who could be ahead, who have we been hearing could go to. We have a defenseman, but he's not one that's really talked about at this point of the draft. I think he's starting to creep up boards a little bit, especially in the past week or two. But um, analytically, statistically, the model loves this player. Tommy Blyle, defenseman, kind of average size, 6 foot, 170. Probably hope he can put on a little bit more weight, but very good production. Um, so he ranked number two analytically, and when consensus wise we kind of combine it all, we would have him around 12. So let's say early teens, like definitely could consider taking him.
Yeah. It's always defensemen from the queue are always an interesting discussion
Yep.
because production is up, but it feels like, and I think it was Brian Bader who does a very good job modeling prospects better than we have. I'll just straight out say that. I think he's had posted something a week or two ago saying that he made some adjustments in his model and the Q was one of the bigger risers as far as like strength of league relative to where it had been. Yes, I'm justifying why we have Tommy Bile that high, but I
Well,
think that there might be a little bit of a shifting in the level of play of the queue, especially over the past couple of years. Multiple players have been drafted at forward very highly from the league, so could be a little bit of a shift there. Interesting path as well, being an American playing in the queue, kind of born in the having U.S. nationality and then playing in the queue, and we'll be going to powerhouse Michigan State in the fall most likely, which is not insignificant either.
one of the things I think to mention, especially when referencing Bader, he openly admits essentially, I don't know if admits is the right word, but he's fully transparent that his model loves offensive production and is not as kind to more clear shutdown defensive guys. It's kind of how our model's working a little bit. Um, so Bader had him at 16. I I think it's just kind of an acknowledgement, and it's why we can kind of also take it as one piece and combine it with consensus and try and find a spot in the draft of where we would be comfortable kind of arguing take this player. Um, because it's not just, oh, model says number two, so take him second overall. You want to try and factor in everything else. So, and you kind of laid out the situation with him. He's not a clear top number one guy. Take him in the first two picks. Statistically, he's very, very good, but you try and factor in everything else. So, love him from the model's perspective. And that probably is, I mean, it's representing statistics, and that's kind of representing him and why he's going or moving up draft boards.
Other thing I'll kind of also not contradict, but kind of add here. He isn't like McKenna, him, Stenberg, and Rudolph are basically we get a probability output. We're not talking that significant of a difference in probability. So, like, if we were tiering them, those four would probably be tier one, with a lot of the other defensemen not that far behind in tier two. So
Right.
it's not like we're saying that he's clearly better. It's maybe a little like the numbers like him a little bit more, but it's not like we would be sitting there pounding on the table like, oh, clear production, clear analytic darling type thing. He's up there, but it's not clear and obvious, I guess.
Yeah, it's he'd kind of be in that top tier, but as you said, that second tier where there's a lot of defensemen is not far behind. Um, which kind of I think leads us into that. I guess we'll kind of talk about him as a tier. So this is where we kind of see Carson
Carl's
Carls. That was one that we were worried we were going to mess up, and I almost did. He would be second tier. Keaton Verhoff would be there. Um, we'd likely probably put Chase Reed in there, Ryan Lynn maybe in there, and then that probably would be it for that second tier as far as defensemen. Some other players, forwards. I guess we should have mentioned we don't have goalies in this ranking. They're not currently part of the model.
might
Um,
talk about a couple at the end, but
yeah.
we'll see. Real quickly before we go to forwards, I think we
Yeah.
would be remiss to not talk real quickly about Albert Schmitz.
Yeah. So I guess he's the example of kind of it's if you're not a highly producing offensive defenseman, the model might not look at you as kindly. Um, so I mean, he kind of would shoot out in the I'm looking for him.
Tier three, four.
Yeah. So like maybe he's considered model wise as like a late first, early second at best. But again, a situation where if you try and combine like, okay, analytically, this is what it's saying. Why? Can we get an idea of him as a player from scouting? Okay, it makes sense a little bit that he's not scoring as highly from the model. So that's kind of a difficult one to read when we combined the model and consensus. We still kind of ended up as like early 20s, right around there for him. So not quite as high as many have him ranked. Um, Again, interesting to point out Bader, who again his model's great. Our model probably leans his way, is similar as far as how it works, who it favors. Um, he had him 25th. So it's very much one of those scenarios where just the lack of production and a lot of production is kind of hurting the player quite a bit.
If you're a fan of a team that the team that does end up drafting him, I'll give you a positive here. Simon Edvinson did not grade out well analytically at the that was a year that the model was run. He did not grade out well at all analytically, and he has turned into a very, very good kind of modern day stay at home defenseman type player with some offensive upside. So that's not to say that he would be a bad pick necessarily, but as we talked about, you want to make sure the team needs to make sure that they know what they're getting and how they're going to use him and what the expectations are, because he's not going to come in and be a Lane or a Cole Hudson and just light up the score sheet instantly.
So talking that second tier, kind of moving to forwards. Um, Caleb Malhotra, who didn't initially start high earlier in the year, kind of has established himself as likely a clear top 10, possibly top five, maybe even top three pick. Um, Model would have him eighth. He's definitely in the second tier. When we combine, we would have him fourth, model and consensus. Vigo Bjork, a smaller winger, I believe, mostly, or maybe he profiles at least as a winger. Um, Model wise, ranks fifth. Combine it with consensus, we have him sixth. That's one that's very kind of similar, I guess you could say. Um, I would say that is probably it for second tier forwards. Um, yeah. Bjork is kind of the interesting, he's the fun high end pick that is smaller so that you kind of can find very differing opinions about him. Um, I haven't seen many people say really top five like the model would have him, but I've definitely seen top 10. And if he started to fall a couple picks past that, that maybe would be a time like if a team was able to try and jump up, definitely try to.
Yeah, he's kind of does some of the recent play in the NHL, especially this playoffs where you saw Montreal, where you saw Zach Benson with Buffalo be absolutely fine in the playoffs with some smaller, more skilled, tenacious type players. Maybe it'll finally start to trend in a direction where they look at the skills that he can bring and how he performs and not necessarily worry about what the measurement says. We'll see, but I think that things are helping him trend a little bit higher in addition to his play on the ice, just kind of the way the NHL's moving. One other thing I'd be want to kind of throw out, relatively speaking, for a lot of the top guys this year is I've run this model. I think this maybe is year 4 or 5 of it. And these outputs that I got this year were on the stronger end as a group than some of the other ones, especially at the top here. I'm trying to think. I know the year that Lafren Lafreniere, so 2020 draft, I think there were Stutzel, Lafreniere, Rossi. I think Perfetti graded out fairly well. I'm trying to go back in my head and think about some of the higher graded ones that draft. It's on AFPanalytics.com, I believe. But this draft is a lot more similar to that one Then 21, where Owen Power went first overall and Matty Beniers. Last year was last year I feel like we didn't have anyone necessarily this high either. So I think as a whole, and this has been the talk of the scouting community as well, that this is a very strong draft, especially at the top. And I think the way that the model outputted this year backs that up very much so. So I think from a at least from a modeling and like good practices standpoint, it's good that that output is lining up with what kind of the consensus eye test is saying. Are you fact checking me?
No, just really quick. Let's see.
I can also just keep talking about nonsense for a second. Well,
So looking at the probability score of 50 or higher, this draft we have 14 in that range. And 2020 was the year you were referencing. Looks like 12 in
yep.
that range. So that was a stronger year as far as those outputs, higher outputs, and this draft obviously being two more players, just as strong, slightly more.
And then even expanding a little bit more, around 40% is also almost an entire first round. And I don't remember, and I think there were some years that tier two or three was 40% in that draft. So I think that again, overall, it seems like this draft as a whole seems to be a little bit stronger, which again lines up with what people have been saying for a couple years now.
All right. So kind of want to, how do you want to go about the rest of this list? Do you want to, I don't really want to necessarily go name by name, but
No,
are there players you want to kind of point out maybe? One I'll say, and maybe you can half listen to me, maybe find some other names. One that I want to point out is someone who, at least consensus wise, on a lot of rankings are kind of the name's kind of in that second tier, but didn't favor out very well in the model was Tynan Lawrence. Um, it does seem like he's, I don't want to say fallen in rankings really, but there's seemingly a little bit around him that like where at one point he was talked of as a top five, like maybe he's a little more top 10 at this point and maybe sneaks into 11, 12, 13 range. Um, Models perspective. So again, gonna keep saying it every time. Statistics, it would have him about 46. So let's say early to mid second round statistically. Now he was one that went from juniors to the NCAA, and it wasn't one of the more seamless transitions that we've seen. It was a little choppy for him. And I think that helps provide a little bit of context that, okay, model's a little bit low on him. What are the scouts seeing? And I think that's kind of where it's good to combine and say, like, okay, maybe we should be a little hesitant in the top five, but not a player that's dropping to middle of second round. You're probably more comfortable once we get near 10 and on, kind of in that, let's say like 8 to 15, maybe a little more than that range in there. That's where you start to have the conversation of, are we comfortable taking him?
yeah, he is also so the model does give credit for producing at a younger age, at a higher level, in a higher skill level or competition level, I guess I should say. So like the NCAA. But with that said, you still need to put up a level of production to get credit. He is very young. He's an August 2008 birthday, which is very close to the cutoff of this draft. I think
Yep.
it's early September, so basically a month older than before he would move into the next draft. That's not insignificant. So it is an interesting kind of like dynamic here of his production when he went to Boston University, not good. 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points in 18 games. That's not going to get it done. Gavin McKenna also started off the season rough, but then ended up finishing very, very strongly. McKenna also had a really, really good year at a young age again in the WHL that helped propel him, but then McKenna's finished the season. So if Lawrence kind of took this, had played a full year and kind of took the same step as McKenna in the second half, it he probably grades out a little bit better, but kind of the path he took leads to not the best grading out analytically, at least in our situation. But it is interesting that some people were kind of talking about him as maybe it was a mistake to have went to college because it might have truly hurt his draft stock a little bit. But also keep in mind he's a 17-year-old playing against 22, 23, 24 year olds, which is not insignificant.
Yeah, and as you laid out, l late birthday.
Yes.
Yes, we'll call it late birthday. Um, I want to say the cutoff's the 15th of
That that
September,
that's what I
I
thought in my
believe.
head, but I was not
About a
confident
month,
enough to say it. Yeah.
a little more. Okay. Who else is standing out here? Mention Wyatt Cullen as a name. Model doesn't love his production, but consensus he is ranked pretty high. Um, I believe there's a list we have that has him as high as six. I believe that was just the elite prospects list. Um, but plenty of other prominent rankings have him kind of low, right around 10 to low teens. Um, so that's another player that, like, numbers wise, maybe he's not quite there, but scouting wise, teams like him. Um, kind of looking for a good opposite.
Oh, I'll be the positive if you want.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
One that seems to be grading out better analytically is Marcus Nordmark out of Sweden. We have him mid
A little bit. Yep.
middle to I guess 22nd overall, so a little bit past midpoint of the first round. Also in Brian Bader's model, kind of very similar spot in his. Most the scouting consensus from the list that you had pulled have him more like a second round pick. So he's someone that analytically seems to be grading out very quite well. That would be someone. There was another name that was connected to Buffalo by a lot of people, but that would be a Buffalo Sabres special rate with that pick that they just acquired from San Jose potentially. Could have been a special at 27th overall too, depending on how teams are thinking. But that's someone that you wonder if a team that leans a little bit more into analytics ends up taking towards the end of the first round over maybe a bigger toolsy forward or defenseman who looks the part but hasn't really had the production on paper.
Another name that stands out that the model's high on in comparison to consensus. So this is generally a early second round pick. Ben Macbeth. Model has him right at, we'll say 19, so kind of right around that 20 range. Defenseman. Um, And something I'm just kind of noticing now, I guess I did know this to an extent, at least with the first two names, but if you're a college hockey fan, this draft for defensemen and specifically defensemen committed to Denver, Daxon Rudolph, Ryan Lynn up towards the top, and then a player in Ben Macbeth that we have model wise 19, combine it with consensus mid 20s. He is also committed to Denver. So a very strong defensive class coming in for Denver this year.
Well, Michigan State's going to get Chase Reed and Tommy Bile both
Yeah.
on the blue line too. So a couple
Yep.
powerhouses loading up on the blue line and just big names overall. So yeah, yes, if you're a college hockey fan, a lot of names that are going to be in the top of this draft that you should be watching fairly regularly next year because outside of McKenna and Stenberg, I can't imagine maybe Malhotra sticks and plays for his dad in Vancouver, but
If that's the pick.
I don't know anything. I'm just that
Oh,
just
I
that
know.
seems
Yeah.
like what's going to happen. But I don't think that necessarily anyone besides McKenna Stenberg are looking at true NHL regular role this year.
Yeah, I'll add there kind of, you never know. There might be one random player, but generally it is those two that seem kind of the clear, obvious ones. Got another name?
Um, since you didn't want to do any of the French names, I'll do Maddox Dejanay. I think I got that right. Out Quebec. Another one that we would probably take. Actually, we're not quite as high on him as the model or as the
We're
consensus is, but
we're
kind of
kind of
similar.
it's a very similar one. So that's one where I would say analytics and consensus are right around the same page. So you're kind of talking late first, early second.
Yeah. No, yeah, never mind on he doesn't stick out as much as I thought he did. Ryan Robrick was another one that we were talking about as a potential forward sleeper option. He's on the older side out of the OHL, but I believe he has some really good production this year for Niagara in the OHL, not Niagara University. I'm sure unless you're in Western New York, you're probably not confusing the two,
True.
but if you're going to the draft in Buffalo, you probably should know the difference. It does matter there.
Um, yeah, this is an interesting name because I've seen here and there. There's people that do have him right at the end of the first round, right at the beginning of the second round, kind of right in there. And there's some that kind of say like that's a great pick at that point in the draft. Um, from a model standpoint, as you said, very good. This would have him sneaking into the top 10 at number 9 from the model's perspective. Um, kind of pairing him with consensus because there's some kind of right in that range of late first, early second, but there's some that also have him as more of a third, even creeping towards the fourth round a little bit. So if he's there kind of towards the end of the first, that's where I think you really start to think about like, can we take this guy? I guess if you're a very analytically heavy team, you're maybe considering him late teens, early 20s, but value wise, I think you might be able, not that there's tons of trades, but you might be able to wait and be able to select him end of first, early second.
Interesting on Robrook is that he doesn't seem to grade out as well from kind of the general consensus because looking at him on paper, he's someone that you would actually think teams or like scouts would like a lot. 6'3", 209, has scored over a point per game in the OHL the past 2 years on a Niagara team that is not generally the strongest team in the OHL. That's a
Did you say
profile.
center?
I did
He's a
not say
center,
center.
like size down the middle.
Is it Hockey DB has him listed as wing, so I don't know exactly
Ah,
where
okay.
he'll translate to, but
Yeah,
maybe some
regardless.
center flexibility, bigger, a little bit bigger. I we'll see what happens. I mean, I we're not watching enough Niagara Ice Dogs games to be able to give a full on informed opinion, but he has the profile of someone that you would think teams might covet, and maybe that translates a little bit better.
Another name we're close on matching with Adam Valentini, Michigan forward. We've kind of model wise it has him right at the beginning of the second round, and there's some of that kind of very late first round, early second round in consensus, but also again some that have him going quite a bit later. That is a name I've seen recently, just kind of hockey community looking on X, seeing different draft stuff. That it's kind of he's kind of being thrown out there like, hey, keep an eye on him. Teams like him. Um,
Maybe we just wrap up this episode with a couple goalies quickly, unless you have anyone else that stands out.
Last
So,
one I'll say is Pierce Bowie was
correct.
OHL, headed to Penn State this year, or committed to Penn State at least. Um, this is an interesting one. I believe he's a little bit of a smaller forward. Yeah, so he's trying to convert that in my head. If I'm remembering correctly, he's 5'11", 160 pounds, just about. Smaller forward. From a statistical standpoint, the model loves him, has him early teens at 13. Um, consensus, he's one of those players kind of all over the place. So some have him in the 20s, some have him getting close to end of the third or at the end of the third. So um, that's an interesting one to point out, I think, because again, just undersized forward producing very well. How are teams viewing that now? Um, I, I would like to see a team make the bet and take them early. Um, just as kind of someone who is, I don't know if I'd say tired of the whole conversation about players being too small, but um, if guys are if guys have very good or elite talent, I think it's more likely to still translate.
So I guess we'll finish up with a few goalies. I did a lot of work for our fantasy league. I wanted to cook, get some underrated goalies to stash for a little while. And I would say there's some that I like a lot. But probably different from consensus. I forget Brady, is it Brady Knowings, US National Development Team, who I think is kind of consensus top goalie. I don't like his statistical profile whatsoever. He he hasn't really performed overly well, so he would concern me a little bit as a pick. I think probably the top two-ish goalies are both first name Tobias. We got Tobias Trable and Tobias.
Tavers,
I had Ernick
Tavaresnik,
Tavaresnik,
Tavaresnik. Yep.
Tavaresnik, Tobias Tavaresnik. I think those two are probably the top two. Trable, I believe. OHL with the Youngstown Phantoms, if I'm remembering correctly. He's very, very good. Very good production. I think he would probably be my first pick if I was picking a goalie. It'll be interesting if William Lassell is on a team's radar because it's kind of funny. A lot of people like to kind of joke about how the Q is a very wide open, no defense, lots of scoring, but he put up very, very respectable numbers in that league. Headed to college, but not the biggest of all programs. He's also a little bit on the smaller side. A lot of things that teams traditionally don't like in a goalie, but you kind of look at the numbers and where he put those up. You wonder if that can translate to maybe some long-term developmental success.
Do you have some maybe, I guess we'll call them like sleeper, real sleeper picks?
Overager Ben Herbeck. He was at he was in college Providence, I want to say.
He might he might be headed to Providence. Let
One
me
of the I think he played a year in college. Ryder Fedorov, I think that he's on some lists. He's definitely another again smaller goalie.
Freebeck was OHL. Barry Colts put together multiple pretty solid seasons, and this will be his first year with Providence.
Okay, so headed to Providence. Okay, but he is
I
an overager, which goalie that's a little bit of a different situation.
I want to say another overager would be John
Parsons,
Parsons, who is already at Providence.
maybe okay. That's
Yep.
maybe who I was thinking of. My very down the list sleeper is Arvin Jaswal, Ottawa of the OHL. Kind of, I think, played a split role with, I don't know who the other goalie, but I think the other goalie also performed fairly well there.
He was with Barry.
Oh, he was with Barry. Okay.
So he was with Freebeck. Yeah. So
Okay.
they both did very well.
So, I mean, maybe there's a little bit of playing behind a good team there, but
Yep.
you also don't walk into 23 games and a 920 save percentage either in a good league. Again, probably quality of team might help a little bit, but that's my very late sleeper. I kind of don't expect him to get drafted this year. Could be a next year type of player, but if I were to throw a dart at some point as an NHL team, he's someone that might be a little interesting on my radar.
Prospects. I think that probably is good. Um, so hopefully some valuable early first round discussion, but also some, I guess, where can you find the value discussion, I think is what we had. And I think that went pretty well. And even going into second round, we rattled off some names that will probably be there. Um, and again, this is, I think to be fully clear, just to make sure we kind of mentioned it at first, but we're looking at this primarily from an analytical standpoint, but trying to factor in the consensus rankings as sort of a pairing as far as analytics and scouting. So um, I think that kind of helped us find these names as far as where is their value.
Regardless, at this age, all these prospects have the opportunity to write their own narrative
Yeah.
still. Like there's I'm sure prospects in this draft or past drafts or whatever are listening to this podcast, and by that I mean they definitely are not consuming this, but they might see some of our stuff on X or like our website or anything, and it there's time to move up down. Like you can put the work in, and or conversely not put the work in, and that's going to lead to success. So success or lack of success. Hopefully everyone succeeds, of course, but it's the draft is always so funny. Like we everyone gets so excited about their team adding all these like late round value players that seemingly are good value picks at the time, but it's going to be 3, 4, 5 years before
Yeah.
anyone knows where anyone's trajectory is kind of trending, because just 18 years old, 17, 18, 19 years old, there's a lot of outcomes still.
One last thing to kind of mention, and it's related to your point of kind of like who knows truly at this point. They can completely write their own story still. There is very much so an increase in players going to the NCAA. Roughly half of our first round is committed either to go this upcoming season or the following season. Um, that's not unheard of, but it is a very new trend that we're starting to see, and it's something that's probably a little more difficult to predict, especially as far as like how are these players going to transfer into that setting, and is it going to change opinions of is this guy top 10 or is he just first round? Um, so I think even within the first year, there's going to be more debate than there usually is, or first year after the draft, I should say, than there usually is about a player. And again, even at that point, it's like pump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Gavin McKenna go to Penn State, have a rough first half, and then second half, oh yeah, he reminded us why he's going to be the first overall pick this year.
Yep.
And I think the fact that other players kind of did chase him down a little bit, I think is a testament to them, not so much knock on McKenna. I think Stenberg put together a very, very good year, very good World Juniors. Kian Verhoff was got off to a great start at North Dakota, and he had risen. Some of the other defensemen, Chase Reed, Malhotra, came on really, really strong at the end of the OHL season. So it, just half a season changed a lot of opinions on players like Tynan Lawrence. We talked
Yeah.
about earlier. Half a season changed the opinion on him a lot, right or wrong. So we'll see how that all kind of ends up translating.
I think that's probably it for this episode. And heading into draft week, I think we're a little less sure about exactly what we're going to be able to do, but decent chance one of us throws something together about something as we get closer to draft day.
Yep.
Um, just not as sure about what that's going to be at this point. Probably rumors or actual
Current
things
events type
happening.
thing. Yeah.
Yep.
So we appreciate you listening. Max Term Podcast available on all major podcast platforms. Content including contract projections and probably some sort of write up on the prospects will be available at afpanalytics.com. If you want to interact, questions, thoughts, X, Blue Sky, threads at AFP Analytics. Again, if you're someone that's going to be at the draft and looking to produce some content or anything, let us know. Or even just around free agency, if you're looking to produce some content, DMs on X or submit a contact on AFP Analytics, and we'll do our best to accommodate who we can. But we are definitely going to be pulled in a lot of directions in the next week, especially as the draft kind of arrives and everything. So we appreciate you listening, and we'll talk to you next time.